and welcome to the AARP Civic Debate Series, a joint production of Colorado Public Television and AARP. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Tonight, we continue our series of debates looking at the major races for the Denver City Council. Tonight's debate features the candidates from Denver's District 3. Joining us for the next 60 minutes are Veronica Barela, Annie Martínez, and Jamie Torres. Raymond Montoya is also running and had planned on joining us, but at the last minute had a personal matter arise that stopped him from being here today. Everybody, let's get right to it. We have an hour, so let's get as much information to our constituents as we possibly can. Veronica, I'm going to start with you on our first question. An affordable public transportation system is vital to a livable city and to the many Denver residents who depend on it. What policies would you pursue in the City Council to promote a more affordable and accessible transportation system for all city residents?
Well, I think it's really good the city started transportation, agency within the city. That needed to happen. I believe in multimodal transportation. So I would like to see more bike paths. I would like to see more people using public transportation. Public transportation is great, but Denver doesn't have public transportation like some of the other cities do. New York and Washington, and you have to get. In order to get somewhere, if you have to usually walk a long way to get to a bus or a light rail, and then it really doesn't take you where you want to go. And so it's several bus stops to get to where you want to go. I'd like to see RTD work on that a little better. I think that we really need to push people using alternate forms of transportation. One of my platforms is climate change. And the more we get rid of fossil fuel and use correct sources of energy, alternative sources of energy, the better for us, our planet, and our neighborhoods.
Annie, same question. How do you promote an accessible and affordable transportation system for all of Denver?
I think Denver implementing its own transit organization as part of the city, as Veronica mentioned, is one of those first steps. I think RTD is not sufficient for the vast metropolis that Denver is becoming. I do think we need to accentuate a lot of the other options that we also have, like ride shares and the scooters, things of that nature. I've also looked into a few other cities have unionized city-owned ride shares where the employees are paid better and treated like employees rather than independent contractors, as they are with Lyft and Uber, which also we've seen cannot provide a lot of safety, as we've seen in other instances with young ladies and other individuals being hurt or murdered in Lyft drives. So there's a lot of ways that we can create a lot of benefits while implementing better transit in Denver. It helps the environment, it helps our lower socioeconomic status individuals be able to access services, be able to work, be able to get around, and it also helps keep people safe if it's done in a way that the city is organizing it. So I think really it's a matter of having better ideas and then the leadership to implement them.
Mm-hmm. Jamie, same question. How do we promote an accessible and affordable transportation system in Denver?
There's a couple organizations that have been working really hard at this, especially for communities that tend to lack a lot of options when it comes to transit in West Denver. 9 to 5 as well as Mile High Connects. And I think going exactly to those organizations who have been creating a series of recommendations would be my first approach, because they've been talking to community about what they need and how quickly they might need it, and the structure of those things. And some of that resulted in returning bus lines to West Denver. The 4 coming back down Morrison Road was a huge win, and it took a lot of advocacy. And so those kinds of partnerships really help sustain and support communities in West Denver again. I ride the bus, I ride the 9 into work every day, but I don't ride the light rail, which is a block and a half from my house, because it takes me to to a mile apart parts of downtown. So we've got to make sure that people have options and that they can afford them. I think it was really powerful, the rate changes that RTD made for low-income families, but seniors and people with disabilities were relatively left out of those equations, and that needs to be the next hurdle.
Okay. Annie, we'll be starting with you with this next question. Denver is currently experiencing a shortage of affordable housing. If elected, what would you do to protect and increase the supply of affordable housing, specifically in light of the prospect of increased gentrification of some neighborhoods and along newly opened light rail lines?
I think one of the first things to look at is how we define growth versus gentrification. I think gentrification, at least in my book, implies growth and development without community-focused involvement. I think gentrification, rightfully so, implies and kind of relies on displacement of the individuals that were there, right? So Denver can grow, and West Denver can grow. West Denver has grown in a lot of ways that has been positive, but if it's not with the community-led engagement that it requires, it will be gentrification and push out our most vulnerable communities. So one of the things that I think matters the most when looking at this, especially in West Denver being so kind of like on the precipice for so much of this kind of change, is looking at revising some of the zoning code in terms of occupancy as well as the type of zoning. Also, probably just, I would be in favor of removing the linkage fee altogether. I know some individuals have talked about raising it to a point that developers would not opt to use it. I don't think we'll ever get to a number where they won't opt to use it, because I think they'll always find it as the cost of doing business. So I think just opting out, removing the linkage fee altogether would be the stronger way to go about it. I also believe in instituting a public bank in Denver that would help build community land trusts. That way we actually have some of these properties brought back to us from DHA or wherever they're at, bring them back to the city themselves, and then use that to build actual public housing. Denver not only has a breadth of luxury housing, but then we have a dearth of public housing and transitional housing that's really the highest need. We have a super high need of these public housing that doesn't exist, and we could create that. We could create that stock with public land trusts and public banking. And I think that those are some of the ways I would go about to solve these problems.
Jamie, same question to you. Affordable housing is a huge issue in Denver. How do we go about the supply of affordable housing in Denver?
Where we've been missing a conversation is around middle income housing, called the missing middle. And like Annie accurately said, we've been building luxury units that have not all been filled. And it's leaving folks out of opportunities. So that missing middle, I think, is where we need to focus, and where I see the city starting to focus more of its efforts when it comes to its affordable housing fund and where its investments are going. But that's not the only place where I think we can start to carve out some really special opportunities. Some of it might be incentivizing landlords who rent, which is upwards of 75% of West Denver, to rent to Section 8 applicants. What are ways that we can incentivize via property taxes or other areas in order to make those available? Right now we have Section 8 voucher holders who have to leave Denver in order to utilize those vouchers. We should be able to provide them an opportunity here. Likewise, Denver Housing Authority becomes a really big partner, particularly for West Denver and its transit-oriented development, because of the Sun Valley development that'll be coming and the West Ridge development that'll soon to be starting with the bond initiative. So there are a lot of partnerships that I think that Denver has really cultivated, but they need to be protected, they need to be fostered, and we need to make sure that they're really working for the residents that are there so that they don't face displacement.
Veronica, protecting and increasing the supply of affordable housing, how do we do it?
Well, that's what I've been doing all my life. One of the problems is the zoning that changed under Hickenlooper. It really opened the doors for developers to come in and gentrify the city and displace folks. Displacement has been a critical issue. The Latino population has been displaced the most. And Annie's right about a public bank and land trusts. Those are so important. But I think that with the mayor's housing advisory committee, which I sit on, they've put a lot of money into that project. And where I would like to see the money go is to nonprofit housing developers, because their goals their missions are to create affordable housing that's 60% under median income. When you see a private sector developer go in and utilizing housing tax credits, they usually try to do all their units at 60%. But nonprofit housing developers don't do that. And they're more prone to do the 30% that will help house the homeless population. So there's a way to stem this kind of gentrification going on. But what needs to happen is that you need to bring in the community. The community needs to be part of some decision making about developers coming in. For example, when the Parkway Center was built, we wrote the concept paper for that whole UDAG project. The community was part of it. They decided how dense it would be. They decided where the density would go, where the townhomes would go, and we actually brought in a King Soopers. So it works to bring the community in from the ground up, and just not the neighborhood organization, but your nonprofits. You know, all your organizations that know the neighborhood and work with the neighborhood. So there's ways to help with the gentrification. It just needs to happen. It has to be the will of the administration to help make that happen.
Okay. Jimmy, you're going to start on this next question. What do you believe is the greatest barrier to older adults being able to age with dignity in their community?
Oh, the number one barrier? I think there are a few number one barriers.
You can take your pick.
You know, and when I think about that question, I think about my grandma who lives in my neighborhood 5 blocks from me, still in her home. And being able to age in place in her home becomes our number one priority as a family. We want to make sure that she's able to stay there. So that means making sure that we're utilizing the senior property tax exemption that the city offers. And I know that there are seniors throughout our district who don't know about this exemption. I navigated with a friend to this for something that her mom fully qualifies for, and they had no idea that they qualified for it. So I think there's a connection point that could be better made between senior homeowners and the city of Denver and programming that they have available. But beyond that, I think there also has to be a sense of community building. One of the things that seniors face throughout the city is isolation and lacking community connection. And so how can we create spaces and transportation for folks to take advantage of those kinds of opportunities? I've supported a senior women's group in Westwood that meets weekly. And these women are so dedicated to this space because they've created a family, basically. And there are some seniors who will take 2 buses to get to that location once a week. They'd like it more often. So how do we support these kinds of spaces for seniors to get together, for them to have secure locations, secure ways to get there, and even expanding opportunities? We were able to get them to the Botanic Gardens for a day and really take advantage of the things that we all love about Denver, but that not everybody has access to.
Veronica, what do you think is the greatest barrier to aging with dignity in Denver?
Just growing old. I mean, ageism is a real problem in this country, just not in Denver. And we don't respect our elders and learn from them and include them in processes that are so important. I used to work with the senior program at the Rary Community Center or at Denver Inner City Parish. They had a great senior program. And it was wonderful because they had so many activities for them. There's so many resources for seniors that they don't know about. They don't know about that Dura has money to help rehab their homes. They don't know about the tax issue. They don't know things that are going on in their community. So it's really important that organizations and council people reach out to these seniors to include them in what's going on in the community and involve them. I think that's so important because seniors, they love to put on events. They love to cook. You know, they just love it, and the resources for them are a lot of resources. There could be more, but I think it's really important that we educate them around those.
Annie, the greatest barriers to aging with dignity in Denver?
I think the greatest barrier in Denver is the same everywhere else in the United States. I think it's a
a partnership of this intrinsic exceptionalism of needing to be young and amazing and this addiction to capitalism that inherently puts value on the human being based on how much labor they can provide. And our retired people are not providing labor in that tangible sense, right? They provide labor in so many other ways that are so meaningful for communities, for their grandchildren, for just kids in the neighborhood, for young adults who need help and support. They're there for them. They provide so much, but it's not tangible, right? We can't put a dollar on it, and therefore we discard them. The same that we do with those that are mentally ill or disabled and can't work and can't provide so-called value. So I think the biggest barrier is that paradigm shift that we need to have to start looking at life and humans and humanity in a broader sense, more than what value they produce in a monetary sense, but what they add to our life. And recognizing that the elderly community in Denver particularly brings so much to the table and have so much to offer, and we need to recognize and respect that more. Some of the services are out there, as both other candidates mentioned, but I think it's the mentality towards that that really needs to change before we realize how we can support them more.
Let me get to another topic. We have chosen both last week and this week to offer a 1-hour debate featuring candidates that are running for open seats in the Denver City Council. District 3 is currently being led by Paul Lopez, who's term limited this year, so therefore not running. Let me see, I think we've, Veronica, let's see, Jamie, you started the last one, so Veronica, it's your turn to start a question. Is there any decision, policy, or vote that Paul Lopez made while representing District 3 that you disagreed with?
Not really. I mean, he worked really hard to get some parks built, and he worked really hard to get our streets paved, pushing Public Works to do that. I can't think of any policies that he implemented that I would disagree with.
Okay. Annie, same question. We look to Paul Lopez's leadership within this district. Anything that has come down as a vote or policy or an idea that you would disagree with?
Not necessarily disagree. I think there are two issues I feel he could have fought harder on, and maybe he didn't think he had enough support on council. I think one would be the urban camping ban. I think more could have been done there to prevent it. And then the second I would mention is some of the ordinances that were passed that dealt with cooperating with ICE. I think that my understanding is Denver still cooperates to a certain extent with the voluntary warrants that are not really warrants, and they do provide some information to ICE that I don't think they needed to, and I know that Councilman Lopez really fought on it, but for me, I don't think I would have compromised. If that wasn't in there, I don't know if I would have gone with what the mayor ended up signing. I would have fought for harder, but that's me.
Okay. Jamie, disagreements, any sort of policy or votes during Paul Lopez's tenure representing District 3?
First I want to make sure that I mention that the administrative warrants that Annie mentioned, we are written into the ordinance that we do not comply with. So that's not one of the things that Denver cooperates with ICE on, and that's in the ordinance. And that's one of the things that was really powerful to work on with both Councilman Lopez and Councilwoman Kanich from the city side. So like Veronica, there's a lot that Councilman Lopez has fought for District 3, which I really commend him for. The only thing that really comes to mind actually has to do with development throughout the other parts of the city. And the one decision that I recall was the lost vote for a rezone in the Mayfair neighborhood, I believe it was, that Councilman Lopez voted against, which if I were in that seat, would have voted for. And one of the reasons I believe that is because our affordable housing circumstance, even though those units might have been $300,000 and up, that still represents attainable to a certain proportion of Denver's population that may want to live in Mayfair. And so making available housing options throughout the city relieves some pressure on those of us who live in Northwest Denver, West Denver, Northeast Denver, where a lot of pressurizing development has taken place. And so that would have been an opportunity for a release valve basically to be implemented in other parts of the city that have seen relatively stable housing and very little change. We all have a role to play in depressurizing what might be kind of forcing displacement, and that would have been one of the areas.
Annie, you're going to start on this next question. If elected, you'll be part of the council that oversees the city budget. Annie, we'll start with you. What do you feel is the part of the city budget that you feel needs the most attention right now?
I don't think I can list one particular aspect of the budget because for the most part, most of the department, it seems that the money's there. It's in the execution of where that money in those areas, for those budgets go to. So I think it's maybe having a closer eye to what's being line itemed rather than any particular area. Because from reviewing the mayor's budget, I didn't really see any area that was glaring with not having enough resources. It's just more like, is that really the way we want to do things? So I can't really call out one particular one that's glaring to me.
Jamie, same question. Is there, what would you see as the element of the city budget that needs the most attention?
Sure. So I've been in the city for 18 years in the Agency for Human Rights and Community Partnerships. And I think one of the things as we prepare even our agency budget every year is, do we have enough personnel and enough capacity to do the things that we're asked to do and that we feel like are important? And throughout the city, I feel like there are staffing components, capacities that need to be increased. I think if you look at the Office of Economic Development, which was responsible for ensuring affordable housing stock was maintained and complied with, they probably needed more people to have eyes on those deeds as they were being transferred, on properties as they were being turned over, to make sure we didn't lose affordable housing. And now they're trying to get that back, which I commend. But it takes people to put eyes on some of these things. And we've got to be able to pay attention to departments when they're saying, we don't have enough capacity to do this thing that you're asking us to do. And we've seen that not just in our agency, but throughout the city. And that's one of the things that I think really needs to be paid attention to as we start to do this. Every department wants more people, every department wants more programming budget, and I know that it's a prioritization. But sometimes when we're looking at equity and how we actually deliver that, there are things that need to rise to the top or just be placed at the top. For me, some of the new things that we've been adding, not general fund budget to, have been the Eviction Legal Defense Fund and the Immigrant Legal Services Fund. Both of those are not general fund funded, and they should be.
Veronica, same question. What aspect, what particular part of the city budget do you feel needs the most attention?
Well, I think in the Office of Economic Development, what I would have to disagree with Jamie about, they had enough people to deal with the issue that you were talking about with those homes. They just weren't doing their job. And I've seen them hire a bunch of housing people recently. Where some of that money needs to go is into housing. We need more housing money for affordable housing. And so one of the things that concerns me about the budget is that there's too much money going out to consultants. I mean, really, people are getting their pockets lined, the consultants, millions and millions and millions of dollars, and that really concerns me. I think that needs to be taken a look at, and there needs to be more money in the business development office. That business support office almost died, and I mean, it's important to have small businesses in our community because they hire and they bring, resources to a community. And the business support offices need to come back, and there needs to be more money in that revolving loan fund. And the city's been really remiss on that in the last 8-9 years. That's where I would put some more money. The eviction, the how people with their whatever they need, that's critical. There needs to be more money put in that. That needs to be part of the budget. I got my mind running through here about where all this money should go to. There definitely needs to be more money into this homeless problem. I mean, the homeless problem, what's going to solve that is to house a lot of these folks. Mental health and housing, mental health and housing. And that's where the city needs to cough up some more money in the budget.
Well, Veronica, let's make that a segue. And Jamie, we're going to start with you for this. Initiative 300 is on the ballot for the May 7th election. What's your viewpoint on that initiative? And also, what's your viewpoint on the current camping ban in Denver?
It's been really difficult to grapple with both of them, actually, and because I disagree with both of them. I don't think either of them actually solve the critical problem of housing homeless, and that's where we need to put our focus and our money, to agree with Veronica. And not just in, I think, housing. I think there are ways to address the need in that way, but it's also in expanding what we provide in terms of shelter, and really turning on its head just the evening shelter that we provide and making it 24-hour, making sure that we've got options for folks with service animals, for folks who identify as LGBTQ, people with disabilities. Any of these particular reasons might be why they don't want to go to shelters. So we need to be paying attention to that, and really listening to it. I think we also need to be putting up on the table an early assessment of the social impact bond program, because I do believe we can house people and we can save money on the back end of decreasing use and reliance on jails as a system for housing, Denver Health and Detox, which can cost millions and millions of dollars a year for individuals who could be housed for far less money. So I would just like us to put our attention where results can actually be seen.
Veronica, your opinions of Initiative 300, currently on the ballot, and the Denver camping ban, which is current policy.
I really believe the Denver camping ban needs to go away, and I think it eventually will, whether the right to survive passes or not. It's in Boise, Idaho, the Ninth Circuit Court found it unconstitutional as violation of their, of their rights and cruel and unusual punishment. So I think that eventually it'll go away here in Denver in our 10th Circuit Court for the very same reasons. Ban? Yes, the camping ban. The right to survive, if it passes, City Council can tweak that a little bit to make it work better and to alleviate the fears of people having homeless camping out in their front door, but that's not going to happen. Never happened before. The reason the right to survive cropped up was to get rid of this camping ban and treat people like human beings. One of the things that needs to stop in the city is the homeless sweeps. We need to put more public facility restrooms and stuff around the city for these folks. But I get back to what is key here, and the key is to housing. It costs the Denver buses cost $35. You have to make $35 an hour in order to live in Denver, and that's great if two people are doing that. These homeless people don't come anywhere near that. And a lot of these homeless people have jobs, and they don't have anywhere to stay. They're staying in their car. So there's got to be a better solution on how we deal humanitarianly with the issues that are going on in Denver with our homeless population.
Annie, Initiative 300 and the current camping ban in Denver.
So the current camping ban, I would just say, is unconstitutional and immoral, unjust, all of those things. Turn the page, right? With respect to 300, I get frustrated because I find a lot of the backlash and pushback towards it to be fear-mongering coming from the city itself. I find it offensive that the city attorney's office has wasted its money and resources to send city attorneys out to neighborhood associations to fear-monger untruths, because they are untruths. The camping ban does not make any other ordinance that exists that it legalizes an activity all of a sudden legal. It doesn't do that. And to say that it does that is fear-mongering. It's to tell people, be scared of these homeless people. They're going to come and poop in your lawn. They can't do it. They've never been allowed to do it. And 300 doesn't allow it to happen. And what I find really disingenuous and somewhat patronizing and patriarchal is that there's so many people out there saying, well, it goes too far and that's not really what the homeless need. And again, the homeless wrote this. This is a community of organizations and individuals who have lived on the streets, who coalesced and wrote this. Who are we, some of us who've never been unhoused, to say, oh, that's not really going to help you, that's not really what you need or want? Where do we get off? I mean, these are individuals who live that life and who are saying, this is going to help me. And we're telling them, I think I know better than you. I don't think that's really what you need or want. I find that to be incredibly disingenuous and insulting. 300 is not going to create the problems that people are worried about, one. And two, what it will create is the conversation that needed to be happening 8 years ago. From many moons ago, right? I mean, to start with, 300 came up as an answer to this camping ban that never had anything to do with the homeless. It had to do with the individuals that were camping out with Occupy, with the Occupy movement. So it didn't even deal with the homeless. We've used it now to terrorize these homeless individuals and criminalize their existence. But it didn't even start with them. So to say 300 now doesn't solve the problems of homelessness, it was never intended to. It was intended to bring back human rights and dignity to these individuals that are unhoused.
Veronica, it's your turn to start this next question. What do you believe to be the greatest barrier to older adults staying in the workforce and or re-entering the workforce after the age of 50? And what can the city of Denver do to ensure equal access to all interested in working?
Well, you know, ageism is a real problem. It's just another form of discrimination, and I've really experienced ageism in this race big time. I didn't think I was going to experience that much of it, but I did. And so we need to have a program that keeps our elderly productive, especially those that want to still work. I mean, I have friends that retired in their 50s, you know, because they didn't want to work anymore, and they're happy. You know, I retired last year, and I still want to work. That's why I'm running for city council. I enjoy being in politics. I enjoy being in the community. I enjoy what I do, and so I don't want anybody telling me that I can't do that because I'm too old. And I think it's a serious problem in this country. It always has been, how we relegate our elderly to almost a non-existence. It's just wrong. I mean, the points Annie made about how, you know, how our elderly suffer as a result of that are relevant, and we really need to think about what we do to people. You know, as I go around the community and I talk to these elderly residents, they want to talk to me for a half hour, and I'll talk to them because they want to talk to somebody, you know, especially if they've just lost a spouse or somebody like that, and they're lonely, and there's no reason for that. We need to reach out and make a better effort of treating our elderly with some respect, because they're the ones that have the wisdom. And so, like I say, I've been a victim of it myself, and I'm not liking it. But me, I'll fight back.
Annie, same question. What can the city of Denver do to ensure equal access to all who are interested in working?
The city can do stronger HR departments within the city itself when it is hiring individuals to make sure that they're not being discriminated against, or if there's someone who's working there who's being passed up for maybe a promotion or something, to feel that they have safety and security to outcry that to someone in their HR offices. I think the city of Denver can do better work with that. I also think that the same way we've done equal, you know, the state's trying to do equal pay for equal work, maybe the city could be looking into something that looks at that not just in terms of gender, but in terms of age. Maybe there are numbers out there that show us that they're not being hired or paid at the rate that they should be. And if we study it further, we can come up with law that addresses that. But I think a big part of it goes back to my previous answer of valuing individuals for more than just what we think their labor can produce in a tangible sense, because sometimes experience and that wealth of knowledge that one has at a different age, you can't really tangibly quantify, but it's there and it's worth something. And maybe we just need more sensitive people working in these areas to be able to pinpoint that and support these individuals.
Jamie, ensuring the city of Denver ensuring that all who are interested in working can work.
I absolutely agree that the city of Denver can fortify its own workforce through hiring older adults, whether it's in City of Denver departments themselves or some of our quasi, Denver Public Library being one of them. I think there are partnerships that we have, whether it's with business or with nonprofit community, where we can create advantage and deliberate recruitment for seniors to work in those spaces. I feel like we miss a number of opportunities for intergenerational development and exposure through our kids in Denver Public Schools, some of our our young adult programs to work with seniors and older adults who have really worked in neighborhoods, who are artists, who are poets. I think there's a huge depth of talent in especially West Denver's population when it comes to arts and creative community, that we can connect better to residents and to kids. Those are some of the things that I'd like to see happen. I think Veronica's absolutely right that ageism and discrimination play an absolute role, and there are groups, particularly out of some of our philanthropy, who are working to reverse this and really kind of change the impression and the perception that we have of older adults as we move forward. I feel like we come from cultures that value our seniors and our older adults, and honor them, whether it's our indigenous communities, our Latino communities, or our Asian American, and really kind of elevating how we do that can start to change perception.
Andy, you're going to start on this next question. Youth crime rates have been making headlines from the city of Denver as it's in the last several months. Is Denver doing enough to address youth crime? And if not, what should it be doing?
This is an issue near and dear to my heart. I work as a guardian ad litem, actually, which is attorneys appointed by the state to represent children's best interests in delinquency cases and in dependency and neglect, but I'll focus on the juvenile delinquency matters. And not only do we over-criminalize children, and that school to prison pipeline is very real, but then we're not funding enough resources for children to have things to do and places to be that are safe. We don't have enough parks and recreations out there for them. Not all of them are free. Then we also don't have enough family that are connected. You've got individuals being displaced where grandma can't stay at home anymore and she can't watch the kiddos. So it's kind of like this nebulous effect, right? Where we've got parents who are either single parents or both working double jobs trying to get by because wages aren't high enough and rent is too high. Then we've got kids who don't have enough outlet for them and they don't have enough attachment to their parents. They're over-criminalized at the schools because the schools are undersourced and underfunded. They're overwhelmed and their first instinct sometimes is, I can't deal with it, call the school resource officer, let them figure it out. And then you're also factoring in that these individuals that sometimes would have extended families are being displaced and not providing the extra supports that they could. So you have this whole faction of children that are just out there, latchkey kids with nowhere to go and nowhere to be. And of course, when that happens, you're going to get into trouble. So I do think that we're not doing enough. And we have a lot of black and brown kids out there that are being targeted primarily with a lot of this school to prison pipeline issue. And we're not giving them the resources that they deserve to really succeed. And then they end up in DYC, they serve their 2 years, and then now we've criminalized this child. This is a 17-year-old or maybe an 18-year-old that we have institutionalized, we have not rehabilitated. So I think that there is a lot that we could be doing with respects to getting kids off the streets, helping them be more productive. But again, I think it goes back to this big nebulous thing of all these pieces being affected, and then it all comes down to how our children are hurt.
Jamie, addressing youth crime in Denver, is enough being done? And if not, what needs to be done?
Yeah, I don't think enough is being done. And some of our attention is paid definitely toward criminalization and not options and opportunity. And that's both a role that I think our city and law enforcement pay to the particular issue, but also one that I see our nonprofit community stepping up into. And so identifying, I think those organizations that are trying to do really good, just don't have capacity to expand is one thing. Among them maybe Servicios de la Raza and Roots Family Resource Center in West Denver. But we also, I think, pay particular attention to what Annie mentioned in terms of school resource officers. We need counselors in those spaces, not law enforcement. And the bigger picture, which is really building systems where families can bring themselves out of poverty. Poverty becomes one of the critical pieces for why crime might be high, why vulnerability might be high, and that's something for West Denver we've really got to be paying attention to, because we've got families who were vulnerable 10 years ago, they're more vulnerable now to wage stagnation, to rental increases, any number of other issues. Yes, we need law enforcement as a partner and a tool, but not as a carrot or a stick. And so these are things that I think require much bigger conversation, and for us to identify what are things that are working and how can we support those.
Veronica, wrap it up for us. Youth crime in Denver, what needs to be done?
You know, we've gone through so much with that, you know, the summers of violence. And, you know, I think one of the really places it starts is with law enforcement and the racial profiling. A lot of our kids are, you know, this, you know, school to prison pipeline starts with that racial profiling with law enforcement, and I think that really needs to stop. And I know Paul Pazin is working on that really hard, but that's a huge problem, you know, in all cities, and it's a huge problem here. And the resources, you know, that need to happen around this problem needs to happen at Denver Public Schools. Denver Public Schools needs to step up to the table and create more programs for these youth. It takes a village, right? And so where is that village now? You know, can you actually look at it and see that there's a real village here helping these youth? For example, the Denver Inner City Parish lost their school. And that was a huge help to the youth, keeping them out of trouble, getting them through school, getting them on to college. We've lost 2 schools in Denver around that. And that's really unfortunate, but you know, like GRASP, they do a fantastic job with the youth, and he really struggles with the city. He really struggles, and he needs more resources. I've never seen anybody in my life work better with the youth problem, the gang youth problem, than Cisco. And you know, we need more programs like that because they actually work. They actually work, and so you have to work with, you know, the community around these issues, because you know, these kids aren't bad. They just, you know, they're like Annie said, they're latchkey, and they don't have anything to do and anywhere to go. And I know the mayor did open the community centers up, you know, that they didn't have to, you know, if they had a card to get in, and that's really important. I think Denver needs to do more around that, because it's a problem. And you know, with the gentrification happening and this displacement, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, let's stay in the crime theme. Jamie, you're going to be first up on this question. The safety manager is appointed by the mayor, but clearly has a strong connection to the council and what happens in the entire city of Denver. Decisions made there can impact what one of you may do as a future city council person. What's the most important role for a safety manager to be successful in Denver, and especially when working with the city council?
Well, I think it has everything to do with connection to community and being able to enter into conversation with community about big picture safety concerns or needs. I think what Manager Troy Riggs has done has been a really good first step in identifying where it is opportunity for better conversation with safety departments. Where does that need to start, in what neighborhoods, and how do we really initiate what conversation then leads to action and policies and programming. That's not really a conversation that we've had in the past with our safety departments. It's largely been about oversight and discipline cases and structural and programmatic pieces of the 3 departments. So I'm encouraged that they're starting to look at what's our bigger connection to the community as we start to look at opportunity and vulnerability. Because when something happens to a community, it's not just an incident that happens to a person or a household. It really does reverberate throughout an entire neighborhood. And so we really have to be able to think about what are solutions that we can all work on together. And that's a direct conversation with a district council person. And so I would welcome that kind kind of conversation with a manager of safety, and then really looking at what's our representation in even your hiring within safety departments, from high school graduates, college graduates who live in my community, because those are positions that I think could be better represented by community residents who may be Black, maybe brown, maybe have multiple languages to their credit, who could really make the departments better.
Veronica, what's the key for a safety manager and the council to work together?
Well, I haven't seen any manager of safety really reach out very good over the years, and that's a real problem, because there's so many problems in terms of, like with the sheriff's department. The auditor just said that, with the sheriff's department, that there's a big safety issue for both the sheriffs and the inmates. Well, what's the manager safety's role in that? They should have some role in that. The use of force. I mean, that was like brain damage trying to get the city to implement a better use of force policy. And what is the manager's safety's issue around that? I mean, in the community meetings, they were never really a feature in it. It was always the chief of police or the head of HRCP. But the manager's safety is a role that the city's talked about for many years, is just getting rid of it, because it doesn't really do anything. And so they need to be more active, both with city council, both in the community. I mean, if you look at the chief of police, he's out there in the community, and it just, all the chief of police have been pretty good about being in the community. Some better than others, but this chief of police has been really good about this use of force issue. But the manager's safety is the city could probably save over $100,000 by not having one.
Annie, question goes to you. What's the most important parts with a safety manager and council working together?
I think it's establishing that they have to work together. First of all, I think being appointed by the mayor sometimes kind of keeps this weird wall where they may not feel that they need to work with council as directly, because at the end of the day, who they care about is the mayor and not necessarily council. So I think maybe strengthening some type of obligation there would be helpful, but also clarifying what it is that they want to do and what they're trying to do. And also looking at safety as a bigger collective issue. Kind of back to what Jamie had also mentioned, safety in a community involves a lot of things. Being safe in your home, knowing that you have work the next day, that you're gonna be able to keep food on your table, and that you're gonna keep the light on. These are issues that help keep people out of desperation that can have crime come out of that, right? Where most of the crime that happens in Denver, having seen it at the jail personally, they're crimes of desperation. They're not, acts of true malice for the most part. And so if we really want to address safety, I think we need to address it as a more holistic approach. Are our families and individual community members safe in their existence right now? Do they have a roof over their head? Can they access one? And do they have food? Do they have clothing? Do they have running water? If they're getting most of these basic needs met, a lot of crime goes down already just from that intrinsically. So maybe kind of defining what this nebulous role is and putting more obligations to it to see the city council people more directly, as well as having more tangible requirements to view the city holistically.
We're going to get a little more general on this one. Veronica, you're going to be up first. What is the biggest issue in Denver or in District 3 that no one's talking about? We'll go to you first, Veronica.
The biggest issue?
The biggest issue no one's talking about, isn't getting the headlines, isn't getting the attention that people do need to know about.
Well, as you look at maps, like with health and hospitals or things that come out of the Office of Economic Development about gentrification and stuff, District 3 is the highest poverty rate in the city. I mean, they're always the darkest color. They're the dark red. And except for Lama Lincoln Park is not as bad as the rest of them because it's been gentrified. So that's a real issue. For example, to me, environmental justice is really a critical issue in our neighborhoods. The only food desert in District 3, the only a community that's not a food desert is Loma Lincoln Park, because we helped bring that King Soopers in many years ago. But if you look at the rest of District 3, they're food deserts, which really impacts a community. Because, you know, if you don't have access to healthy food, fruits and vegetables, and just convenience stores, you're eating processed food. You know, so you've got a diet of processed food. You know, you have the issue of being displaced. I mean, the most important thing in our District 3 is to be housed, to have healthy food, and to have a job and a living wage. And those are the really important things in that community that need to be addressed and looked at. And also rebuilding and revitalizing in a holistic way, which includes bringing businesses in to help create those jobs, to bring affordable housing in to house people so they feel safe and their children are safe. You know, all these holistic things are extremely important.
Andy, what's the biggest thing people aren't talking about in Denver?
It's hard because we're talking about so many big things, right? It seems like the conversation's being had. Maybe we're not getting the answers we want or need or deserve, but conversations are being had about a lot of the big issues. To not take Veronica's answer, I think the food desert issue is huge in District 3, but then I would also, to try to present something different, traffic and sidewalks, that kind of infrastructure is a big issue. Infrastructure is kind of falling apart. I literally broke a rib canvassing, tripping on the sidewalk. Yeah, so it was all disleveled, and I was trying to save the iPad and I ate it. So sidewalks are kind of a hot mess. There's been a few roads that I've kind of crossed paths trying to do canvassing also, where I'm like, wow, we need a speed bump or something here, because people are driving 50 miles per hour in a residential. And while these may not seem like huge issues, they're big in quality of life and they're big in safety, and they may not be getting the type of attention that they deserve, even though rightfully so we're focusing our attention on housing and those issues. I think that this goes to that quality of life that District 3 kind of gets ignored a lot, because we're not one of the more glamorous districts. We don't have our bike lanes that are really nicely set up, if they exist at all. Our sidewalks are a hot mess, and our roads go way too fast in some of these residential areas. So I think those kind of quality of life issues get glazed over in District 3 a lot.
Jamie, biggest issue we're not talking about in Denver or District 3?
Yeah, you know, I've been in my agency in the city for 18 years, and one of the things we've always struggled with is bringing attention to the nuance within some of the data points that we see, whether we're praising them or trying to figure out how to make some of them better. And what it often comes down to in our work is the fact that we don't talk very much about the impacts of racism and privilege in Denver. We are an incredibly progressive city, and sometimes that gives us an opportunity to overlook responsibility to looking deeper at some of our institutional and systemic problems. We've just launched the Race and Social Justice Initiative in my agency through a lot of hard work and through learning from other cities. But this is trying to get through. Yes, we offer services to anybody and everybody, and we're trying to incorporate an equity lens to it. But my agency was started in 1947 with the singular initiative to look at race relations in the city. And 85 years later, we're still talking about this. And so it's still not something that we're effectively talking about in terms of how certain policies might come down that differently impact different communities, how historic issues might create inequity in whether or not folks are able to apply for jobs in an equal way, folks are able to get wages in an equal way, and I would like to see Denver really elevate this conversation, because I think we have the people power and the brain power to do something about it if we really come to the table attentively.
Well, I've always said an hour goes by very fast in the studio, and this was no different. We've asked each of our candidates to give a 30-second closing statement, and we picked numbers out of a cup before the debate to establish the order. So, Veronica, I will turn to you for our first 30-second closing statement. The floor is yours.
Well, I think that I may be the oldest in the race here, but I certainly have the most experience. When I was with NewSed, we revitalized Loma Lincoln Park We know we brought in the King Supers, we built the 2 shopping centers, we put 2,000 people in home ownership, affordable home ownership with down payment assistance and counseling. And so my belief and my goal is to help District 3 in a holistic approach, like I said before. And I think that's critical to help rebuilding a community and a neighborhood.
Veronica, thank you very much. Annie, you're up next for your 30-second closing statement.
Just want to say that I think that I bring a lot to the table, even though I recognize my youth. I have a lot of experience as an attorney, working with some of our most disenfranchised communities, also sitting on a number of boards that worked for a lot of the projects we've even talked about today. I've also lived the experiences that many people in Denver are undergoing right now. I've been unhoused, I've been a victim of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. I am a member of the LGBTQ community, as identifying as non-binary, and I am a woman of color who's first-generation American, who speaks Spanish, más que inglés sometimes, you know, my Spanglish is stronger than English or Spanish. And I truly believe that I come from a very outsider perspective while recognizing how the inside works to be able to make the difference that we need in City Council.
And Jamie, you're last up for your 30-second closing statement.
District 3 is incredibly close to my heart. I've lived there all of my life. I'm third generation in the district, and I've spent the last nearly 20 years working on behalf of communities that live in District 3. I started the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs in 2005, really to make sure that immigrants and refugees had a place at the table when it came to city process and city government. And this was at a time when folks told me, no, that's a federal issue. We don't do anything about that at local level. We do, and we can. And it really is that kind of perspective that cuts through a lot of the really tough issues and identifies this is the path that we can take. These are the things that we can do. This is the change that we can make.
Thank you very much. That is all the time we have for our look at the Denver City Council race in District 3. I'd like to thank our candidates for joining us, Veronica Barela, Annie Martínez, and Jamie Torres. Be sure to tune in next Friday night at 9 p.m. as we take a look at the races for both District 10 and the at-large candidates. I also want to remind you, election day is May 7th, but it is a mail-in ballot. Your ballot should be coming in early next week, so we hope you take advantage of that and look at all the different resources out there. There's a lot of important decisions on the Denver City ballot this year, and there's a lot of great resources out there to check out. You can check out the debates here at cpt12.org, or you can be able to check out a lot of different resources at just throughout your research around your district. Also, know that in races like this where there are many candidates, there's likely going to be a runoff, especially in other races, maybe even the mayor's race. So that election is going to be on June 4th. Don't forget to vote in that one if indeed a runoff happens. So for everyone here at Colorado Public Television and at AARP, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for watching. Good night.